How you spend the last few hours of your day determines how successful you're going to be in your life. The last half of your day is more important than the first half because the last half of your day sets your subconscious up while you're sleeping. While you're sleeping, the last thing you did determines basically what's going on in your brain while you're asleep, which ultimately sets your momentum for the next day. And for most people, the first half of their day might be pretty good. They could be pretty productive, but the second half of their day, it's nothing but pure self-sabotage. The same is true in sports. In sports, the second half of the game is always the most important. It's also the most valued. A lot of players, they're pretty good in the first half, but they fall apart or they disappear at the end. They can't close the game. And in skiing, there's a great example from Billy Kidd, who was an Olympic gold medalist. He said that the last 3 turns of a ski run are always the most important. Most people think it's the first 3 turns of a ski run that are most important because they kind of set your momentum. The truth is that the last 3 turns of your ski run are most important. And that's where most people aren't even really thinking. They're kind of sloppily getting off their skis and then they get onto the chairlift. Well, your last 3 turns basically create your subconscious loop. While you're going up the chairlift, your brain is processing those last 3 turns, and that's what it's really soaking in into the long-term memory. So how you end your day is the same way. While you're asleep, your subconscious is always working. It's always working, and it's basically internalizing how you finish your day. And for most people, at the end of their day, it's just filled with unhealthy consumption. They're consuming junk food, junk media, basically just in a reactive, sloppy state. They're not really present with their loved ones, and so they end up ending. It's like those last 3 turns on the ski lift. They're ending their day really bad. And that ultimately then creates bad confidence, bad momentum, and then it sets them up for worse and worse days. If you finish your day really well, you can then have way more anticipation, way more excitement, way more commitment tomorrow, and you're gonna have better and better days. You're gonna ultimately set yourself up for a better day. And so in this video, I'm gonna talk to you about how you can ultimately set yourself up so that you don't end your day wrong. Because for years, I would have very productive mornings and things like that, but then I would go home and I would just totally self-sabotage. I'd become a shell of myself on the second half of the day, and that ultimately has plummeted the results I could have gotten. So the first thing you need to know is that the second half of your day is actually the more critical part, and how you recover and how you be present and how you end the day sets your subconscious tone while you're asleep and ultimately sets your confidence for the next day. And if you want to make massive progress, it really comes down to how you use your nights. Yes, you can make progress in your mornings, which is really crucial, but if you use your nights better, your mornings are going to be 10 times better, and you're also going to not keep taking steps back. Most people, they'll take a step forward during the day and they'll take a step back at night. And so they're never actually making aggressive movement toward their future self. But if you use your evenings well, then you've taken a big step forward during your day and afternoon, and at night, you've also taken another step forward and set yourself up for even better and better days. So you just need to know that the second half of your day is actually most critical because it sets your subconscious tone while you're asleep, and it ultimately sets your momentum for the rest of the day the next day. And it also stops you from taking so many steps backwards. So the first thing you need to realize is that when you go home, I mean, if you work somewhere else, when you go home, basically your behaviors are linked with an environment. You may work from home because a lot of people work from home now, but when you turn off from work mode, you then go into a different state. Your identity is based kind of in a lot of ways on your mindset. And so you have like a work identity and you have a home identity. Well, one of the things to do at the end of your work is to actually just pull out your journal and just reflect on all the things you accomplished really quickly. This should be just kind of an end of day routine or end of work routine. And then just write down the 1 to 3 most important things you're going to start working on as soon as you start working the next day. The reason this is important is then you can actually just mentally turn off. Because you already know what you're going to do the next day, you can mentally turn off. You've framed the day as a success because you've focused on the good things you've done. That's what Dan Sullivan calls measuring the gain. So you've done that, you've set your intention for the next day, so you don't have to brew on it all while you're home recovering, and then you just mentally unplug. Totally mentally unplug from work. They call that psychological detachment from work in psychology. It's essential to fully recover, to click fully off so that you can be fully in flow wherever you are at home. And as you recover better, you're going to be able to jump back in and focus a lot better when you're at work the next day. So that's step 1, is just literally turn your brain off from work. But then second, know that there's a lot of triggers around your house. Like when I go home, all of a sudden there's all sorts of triggers. There's food that I don't necessarily want to eat because my wife and kids eat a lot of food that are not in alignment with my own diet. And so then usually when I go home, if I'm not aware of my triggers, I'm going to go and just start eating a bunch of junk food, and then it's going to just create a downward spiral. Because usually you create a level of momentum. When I go home, if I start eating junk food, it's just going to plummet from there. Whereas if I go home and I've already got the right mindset, then I know I can succeed. So you want to know your triggers. You also want to be very public about what you're trying to accomplish. You want social support. So, for example, in Alcoholics Anonymous, you have a sponsor or something like that. I use my family as my sponsor. Right now, they know my goals. One of the things that you want to do is ultimately set up quality rules for different environments. For example, when you're working, you should have quality rules around where your cell phone is. It probably shouldn't be around your body. You should probably have it on airplane mode certain times. The same is true when you're not working. You want to have quality rules. So for me, I know that when I go home, there's not the type of food in that environment that I want to eat all the time. And if I don't have the right rules, I'm going to self-sabotage, which is going to lead to more and more self-sabotage. So one of the things I'm doing nowadays is intermittent fasting during the second half of my day. A lot of people, they prefer intermittent fasting on the first half of their day. Well, for me, it's better to do it during the second half of my day because when I go home from work, there's all sorts of junk food there. And so for me, I'm better off just having the rule that I don't eat, and best, I don't use my cell phone when I'm home. Airplane mode at home, no food, no phone at home allows me to actually just be home and focus on supporting my wife and really being fully engaged with my kids and being a positive force. So whatever rules are important to you, you got to set some rules for your second half of the day so you ultimately don't self-sabotage. For me, it's best that I don't have my phone near me, and it's best that I just don't eat food in that environment because that environment is not set up for me to win when it comes to my diet. So instead, I've just made rules. There's a great quote from Dan Sullivan. He says, never go into a new situation without knowing what's non-negotiable. When you go into a new situation, you want to know what's non-negotiable or else the situation's going to beat you. That's one of the things that psychological research has found over and over. Situations are more powerful than people. More directly, situations are more powerful than undecided people. If you're decided, as Michael Jordan said, once you make a decision, you never have to think about it again. Once you're decided and you go into the situation knowing what you're going to do, then you already know that the answer is probably no to whatever the environment is offering. So it's nice to go into the situation with some clear rules, but you also need social support. The other thing that you could do and should do is failure planning. Chances are you will be triggered. And then you need to know what to do. So in psychology, there's a concept called implementation intentions. It's another concept for failure planning. It's planning to fail so that you can ultimately succeed. Basically, you need to know when you're triggered, what you're going to do in response. And ultimately, you turn it into a habit. So for example, it's like if when I walk into the kitchen, I feel like opening it up and drinking some sugary juice or whatnot. If X happens, then my response will be Y. So every time I walk into the kitchen, I want to eat something unhealthy, then I'm going to go grab a cup of water, do 20 push-ups or whatever. Or I'm going to shoot a text to my mom and just say, hi, I love you. Whatever it is, whatever your response is, ultimately what you want to do is once you're triggered to do something wrong, you want to have your pre-planned response. Go do that, and what it does is it builds your confidence. It removes your thoughts for the 15 to 30 seconds when the triggering is most intense. And then it can remind you of your future self and what you really want to do so that you're not caught in the moment. So you want to ultimately have failure plans in place, implementation intentions. Other super important thing to remember is just not to demand perfection of yourself. There's no reason to demand perfection of yourself. You're going to make mistakes, and if you're beating yourself up every single day, then not only are you making your own life hell, you're making everyone else's life hell around you. You can be happy. You don't need to be perfect. Perfection is the enemy of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. The only thing you want to compare your current self to is your former self. That's again what Dan Sullivan calls The Gap and the Gain. This is a free book on the Strategic Coach website, by the way. Such a beautiful book. But the only reasonable, healthy thing you can ever compare yourself to is your former self. And so regularly you want to take time to just take stock and give yourself huge celebration, huge pats on the back for the small or big gains you're making. BJ Fogg, the Stanford psychologist, talks about celebration. There's a lot of research that celebrating small wins is ultimately how you deeply embed new habits. And so you want to regularly measure progress. Don't demand perfection of yourself, but measure your gains, measure your progress, celebrate your progress, have support, have failure planning in place with implementation intentions, have better rules and a better system for yourself when you transition from a work environment to a non-work environment. Also, at the end again of your day, have that little closing routine where you celebrate what you accomplished that day, and then you've defined your 1 to 2 plans, or I would say your 1 to 3 major objectives for tomorrow, so that when you actually do wake up, you wake up with a plan so that you can wake up and be super effective. Just remember that the end of your day truly is the thing that's going to set you up for the most momentum. If you get better and better at the second half of your day, your confidence is going to skyrocket because the second half of the day is where most people fall apart. And the second half of like sports, is where the true high performers and the true winners demonstrate themselves. If you really want to win, you've got to close. You've got to close the day, and you got to get better and better at closing. A lot of people can start things, but very few people can finish. You got to learn how to finish powerfully so that you can ultimately watch yourself finish more and more things. Finishing is how you succeed. Finishing is how you finish. You know, anyone can start writing a book, but how many people can finish? Anyone can start training for a marathon, but how many people can finish? The better you get at finishing your days, the better you're going to get at finishing everything in life, because you're setting the tone that you're a finisher. Your brain, while you're sleeping, is going to process the last few things you do. So if you're binge eating junk food at the end of your day and binge watching media, you are setting the most deep grooves into your subconscious, which is ultimately going to crush you in everything you do, because how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're not finishing strong at night, I promise you, you're not succeeding as much as you could be in your mornings. But if you totally recover, if you win at night, your confidence in the day is going to be so much bigger. And as you win more in the day and then ripple into your night, your days and nights are just going to start feeding off each other, and you're going to start progressing so much, and you're going to start being in flow so much. So that is my invitation to you. Have better nights. Set yourself up for success. Finish your days well. Your subconscious is going to thank you. You're going to be so much better during your day. Make it easy on yourself. Give yourself rules. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I hope you enjoyed this video. Down below, you can get access to my free 30-day Future Self course, or you can watch one of my other videos right here on this page. Have an amazing day.